November 14, 1944. The Hurtgen forest, Germany. Sergeant Frank Morrison crouched behind a shattered oak tree, watching his machine gun crew struggle with a problem that had plagued the Browning M1919 since its adoption in 1918. The weapon sat silent on its tripod, a 31-pound monument to American firepower rendered useless by a limitation so fundamental that every machine gunner in the European theater had learned to accept it as unchangeable law. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The canvas ammunition belt held exactly 250 rounds of 30 caliber ammunition. Each belt required approximately 37 seconds to expend at the weapon's cyclic rate of 400 to 600 rounds per minute. Then came the reload, 15 seconds on a good day, 20 seconds when your hands shook from cold or adrenaline or the concussion of German artillery that had been pounding their position since dawn. 15 to 20 seconds when a German counterattack could cross 200 yards of open ground and overwhelm a position whose primary defensive weapon sat silent while its crew fumbled with fresh ammunition. Morrison had watched 3 machine gun positions fall during the September offensive near Aachen. Not because the guns failed mechanically, not because the crews lacked courage or training, but because those 15-second reload intervals created tactical vulnerabilities that German infantry had learned to exploit with devastating precision. They would suppress the gun with rifle fire during the reload, then rush the position before the crew could bring the weapon back into action. Standard doctrine, proven tactics, unacceptable casualties. The forest around him bore testimony to the grinding attrition that characterized fighting in the Hurtgen. Trees stripped of bark by shrapnel, ground churned into frozen mud by constant shelling. The metallic smell of blood and cordite that no amount of cold November rain could wash away. 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment had been fighting through these woods for 11 days, advancing at a cost of 100 yards per day against German positions that turned every clearing into a killing zone and every tree line into a fortress. Morrison's hands moved across the modified ammunition belt system he had constructed during the previous night, working by the light of a shielded lantern in a dugout 600 yards behind the front lines, canvas and metal, copper links and cloth backing. A solution so simple that it challenged every assumption about how machine guns were supposed to function in sustained combat. The modification allowed his M1919 to fire 400 rounds without reloading. 400 rounds that could suppress an entire German platoon for the 94 seconds required to deliver sustained fire against targets that would not wait for ammunition changes. But the homemade system that could double a machine gun's effective firepower was about to face its first test against an enemy that had spent 6 years perfecting the art of infantry assault. The metal fabrication shop at Camp Butner, North Carolina, had closed its doors for the final time on March 3, 1943, as Sergeant Frank Morrison set down his welding torch and signed the enlistment papers that would transform him from skilled tradesman to infantry soldier. At 32 years old, Morrison possessed hands that could work steel and aluminum to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, and a mind that approached mechanical problems with the systematic methodology that separated craftsmen from laborers. His civilian occupation, listed on military records as precision metalworker, would prove more relevant to his wartime service than any training the Army could provide. Basic training at Fort Benning stripped away the comfort of the fabrication shop, but reinforced the analytical thinking that had shaped his approach to engineering challenges. Where other recruits saw the Browning M1919 machine gun as an immutable piece of military hardware, Morrison studied its ammunition feed system, its cyclic rate, its tactical limitations. 400 to 600 rounds per minute through a belt that held only 250 rounds. A reload interval that created a predictable tactical vulnerability every 37 seconds of sustained fire. By August of 1944, the Normandy breakout had transformed the European theater from static defensive warfare to mobile operations that demanded different tactical solutions than the doctrines developed during the Great War. German forces, defending prepared positions, could no longer rely on fixed defensive lines, but they had adapted their tactics to exploit the limitations of American supporting weapons during the fluid engagements that characterized the pursuit across France. Machine gun crews advancing with assault infantry found themselves engaged at ranges and durations that exhausted their 250-round ammunition belts with alarming frequency. The tactical situation demanded sustained suppressive fire to pin German defenders, while riflemen maneuvered for advantage. Yet, the standard ammunition load forced crews to choose between carrying additional belts that added weight and bulk, or accepting reload intervals that created opportunities for enemy counterfire. Morrison's experience during the September offensive near Aachen had exposed these limitations with painful clarity. German defensive positions, carved into the West Wall fortifications, demanded sustained, accurate fire to suppress, yet the tactical situation required mobility that heavy ammunition loads could not support. The standard solution involved assigning additional soldiers to serve as ammunition carriers, but casualties among infantry companies meant that machine gun crews often operated at reduced strength, unable to maintain the five-man teams that doctrine required for sustained operations. The contradiction between firepower requirements and tactical mobility had cost American lives at every contested town, from Saint-Lô to the German border. Morrison's mind, trained to identify inefficiencies in mechanical systems, began focusing on a different kind of engineering problem during the brief rest periods between combat operations. The M1919's ammunition feed system accepted belts of any length that the canvas backing could support. Yet Army supply procedures provided only the standard 250-round configuration. The limitation existed not in the weapon's mechanical design, but in the logistical infrastructure that supplied frontline units with standardized equipment packages. Individual modification of ammunition belts violated supply regulations that emphasized standardization and interchangeability across all units. But the regulations had been written for static warfare, not for the mobile operations that characterized fighting in the Hurtgen forest, where machine gun crews needed to deliver sustained fire while advancing through terrain that made ammunition resupply nearly impossible during active engagements. The idea crystallized during a 3-day rest period in a Belgian village 20 miles behind the front lines, where 1st Battalion had withdrawn to absorb replacements and repair equipment damaged during the Aachen fighting. Morrison watched supply sergeants issue fresh ammunition belts to machine gun crews, the standard 250-round configurations packed in metal containers that protected the cartridges from moisture and rough handling during transport from depot to front line. Each belt consisted of individual 30-caliber cartridges linked together by copper connectors, with the entire assembly backed by a canvas belt that fed through the M1919's receiver mechanism. The system worked flawlessly for its intended purpose, but it had been designed for the trench warfare of the Great War, where machine guns occupied fixed positions with established ammunition supply points and dedicated crews to maintain continuous fire. The Hurtgen forest presented different challenges. Dense vegetation limited fields of fire to narrow lanes between trees. German positions, positioned to create interlocking coverage, required simultaneous suppression from multiple weapons. Terrain features channeled American attacks into predetermined killing zones, where German machine guns could engage assault teams with devastating effect. Success depended on the ability to deliver overwhelming firepower at the decisive moment when infantry left their covered positions and crossed open ground under enemy observation. Standard ammunition loads proved inadequate for these tactical requirements. Morrison began his experiments with materials salvaged from damaged equipment and surplus canvas acquired through unofficial channels that combat soldiers developed to circumvent supply procedures that could not adapt to battlefield realities. Working in a barn converted to temporary squad quarters, he disassembled 2 standard ammunition belts and studied the copper linking system that connected individual cartridges into a feed mechanism the M1919 could process reliably. The connectors used spring tension to grip each cartridge while maintaining enough flexibility to bend as the belt fed through the weapon's receiver. The canvas backing provided structural support while preventing the metallic links from tangling during handling and transport. The system represented sound engineering that had proven its reliability through decades of service, but it had never been designed for the extended belt lengths that Morrison envisioned. His first attempt joined two standard belts end-to-end using the existing copper connectors, creating a 500-round assembly that should have fed through the M1919 without modification to the weapon itself. The test firing revealed immediate problems. The increased weight caused the belt to sag during feeding, creating friction against the receiver mechanism that slowed the cyclic rate and increased the risk of jamming. The canvas backing, designed to support 250 rounds, lacked the structural integrity to prevent the extended belt from twisting during the feeding cycle. Morrison's second design incorporated additional canvas reinforcement at stress points where the belt's weight created maximum tension on the backing material. He salvaged heavy-duty canvas from damaged equipment bags, cutting strips that he hand-stitched to the original belt material using techniques learned during years of working with industrial fabrics in the metal fabrication shop. The reinforcement distributed the belt's weight more evenly, reducing sagging while maintaining the flexibility necessary for reliable feeding. But the modification created a new problem. The reinforced sections increased the belt's thickness, causing binding when it passed through the M1919's feed mechanism, which had been designed to accommodate the standard canvas backing dimensions. Morrison solved this by carefully thinning the reinforcement material at points where it would contact the weapon's receiver, maintaining structural support while ensuring smooth feeding through the existing mechanism. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The key breakthrough came when he realized that 400 rounds represented the optimal balance between extended firing duration and practical handling characteristics. A 400-round belt provided 94 seconds of sustained fire at the weapon's minimum cyclic rate, nearly triple the duration of standard ammunition loads. Yet it remained light enough for a single soldier to carry and maneuver without assistance, weighing approximately 48 pounds fully loaded compared to 30 pounds for the standard configuration. He constructed the extended belts by joining one complete 250-round belt with a partial belt of 150 rounds, using the existing copper linking system to create seamless connections that would not snag during feeding. The canvas backing received reinforcement along its entire length, with additional support at the junction points where separate belts connected. Each completed assembly required approximately 4 hours of careful handwork, stitching canvas and testing connections to ensure reliability under the vibration and mechanical stress of sustained automatic fire. The completed modification challenged every assumption about machine gun employment that both American and German forces had carried into the European theater. At 48 pounds, the extended belt weighed 18 pounds more than the standard load, but it eliminated the reload interval that had proven so tactically costly during the Aachen fighting. A gun crew equipped with Morrison's modification could deliver sustained, suppressive fire for 94 seconds, suppressing multiple German positions, while assault infantry advanced across terrain that offered minimal cover. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Yet, the modification's capabilities came with significant operational considerations that standard doctrine had avoided through different equipment choices. The increased weight made the belts cumbersome to carry during movement, limiting the number of extended belts each crew could transport during mobile operations. The hand-constructed canvas reinforcement meant that battle damage or wear could not be repaired through normal supply channels, potentially leaving crews without functional ammunition if the modified belts failed during critical moments. Most critically, the modification existed outside official Army tables of organization and equipment, carried by volunteers who accepted responsibility for an untested system that promised unprecedented sustained firepower at the cost of logistical and tactical uncertainty. Morrison completed 6 extended belt assemblies during the battalion's 3-day rest period, each one hand-fitted to ensure optimal performance while maintaining construction standards that would survive combat conditions. The limited production reflected both the time-intensive nature of the hand construction and the experimental status of a modification that had never been tested under actual combat conditions. The belts existed as proof-of-concept prototypes designed to validate tactical assumptions about the relationship between sustained fire duration and combat effectiveness at the squad level. As 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment prepared to enter the Hurtgen forest in early November of 1944, these 6 ammunition belts represented the culmination of innovation born from tactical necessity. The dense forest waited ahead, where German defensive positions would test every assumption about infantry combat that American doctrine had developed during 2 years of fighting across North Africa, Italy, and France. The Hurtgen forest consumed American infantry divisions with methodical efficiency that reflected both terrain advantages and German defensive expertise developed through 6 years of continuous warfare. Dense evergreen canopy blocked aerial observation and reduced artillery effectiveness to area bombardment that shredded trees without destroying the log-reinforced bunkers hidden beneath their branches. Limited road network channeled American advances into predetermined killing zones where German machine guns commanded every avenue of approach. The forest floor, carpeted with pine needles that muffled footsteps and obscured tripwires, transformed every patrol into a navigation exercise through terrain that offered concealment to both sides while favoring defenders who had spent weeks preparing their positions. 1st Battalion entered the forest on November 2nd, 1944, tasked with capturing a series of ridgelines that dominated the approaches to the Roa River dams. Intelligence estimates suggested light German resistance from demoralized units retreating toward the Rhine. The reality encountered during the first day's advance revealed a different tactical situation entirely. German forces defending the forest included veterans from the Eastern Front, soldiers whose combat experience exceeded that of most American units by margins measured in years rather than months. Their defensive positions exploited every terrain feature the forest offered. Bunkers constructed from logs and earth, virtually invisible from more than 50 yards distance. Fighting positions sited to create interlocking fields of fire that covered every clearing and trail junction. Communication trenches connecting strong points in a network that allowed defenders to shift reinforcements and evacuate wounded without exposing themselves to American fire. Minefields covering the approaches to every defensive position, mixed anti-personnel and anti-tank devices that channeled attacking forces into predetermined lanes where machine guns waited with pre-registered firing data. Morrison's machine gun section drew the advance along the battalion's left flank, where a logging trail provided the only route through terrain too broken for vehicle movement. The assignment reflected both the crew's proven reliability and the tactical importance of maintaining suppressive fire capability during movement through woods that could conceal German positions until American soldiers were within grenade range. His crew consisted of 4 men besides himself. Private Joseph Kowalski served as assistant gunner, responsible for feeding ammunition belts and clearing jams during sustained fire. Private Robert Chen handled ammunition resupply, carrying additional belts and maintaining the crew's basic load during movement. Privates William Foster and James Martinez provided security and general support, their M1 Garands ready to engage in targets that appeared too close for effective machine gun fire. The crew had trained together since August, developing the coordination and mutual understanding that separated effective combat teams from collections of individual soldiers. They knew each other's capabilities and limitations. They understood that Morrison's modifications to their ammunition belts represented experimental equipment that might fail at the worst possible moment. They had volunteered to carry the extended belts into combat based on their sergeant's conviction that the tactical advantages outweighed the risks. The first German position revealed itself through muzzle flashes that strobed from a bunker entrance barely visible among the pine trees 200 yards ahead. The MG-42 machine gun opened fire with its distinctive cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, a sound American soldiers called Hitler's buzzsaw. for the tearing roar that set it apart from every other weapon on the battlefield. The weapon's sustained fire swept across the logging trail with mechanical precision, forcing Morrison's section to take cover behind fallen logs that provided concealment rather than protection from the 7.92mm rounds that shredded bark and sent splinters flying in all directions. Standard response to German machine gun fire called for suppression from American automatic weapons, while rifle squads maneuvered to flank positions. But the forest terrain made flanking movements nearly impossible under observation from elevated defensive positions that commanded fields of fire across every approach route. The German crew had positioned their weapon to exploit these tactical advantages, creating a situation where conventional American tactics would require either overwhelming firepower or prohibitive casualties to neutralize the position. Morrison studied the enemy bunker with the analytical approach that had served him in the fabrication shop, identifying factors that standard ammunition loads could not address effectively. The MG42's 1,200 round per minute cyclic rate meant the German crew could deliver sustained fire that would suppress any American movement across the open ground between their current position and the nearest cover that offered flanking opportunities. German doctrine called for MG42 crews to carry multiple ammunition belts, allowing sustained fire for several minutes before requiring resupply from supporting soldiers positioned deeper in the defensive network. American crews armed with standard 250-round belts could return fire for only 37 seconds before requiring a reload that would give the German gunner 15 to 20 seconds of unopposed fire superiority. Those intervals represented exactly the tactical opportunity that German infantry training emphasized exploiting. Suppress the American gun during its reload, then advance while the crew struggled to bring their weapon back into action. Standard doctrine. Proven tactics. Unacceptable odds. Morrison signaled for Kowalski to load the first extended belt while he positioned the M1919 against a fallen log that provided stable firing support while offering minimal protection from return fire. The 400-round belt fed into the weapons receiver with the smooth action that Morrison's careful hand-fitting had ensured, each copper link engaging the feed mechanism exactly as designed. The additional weight created slight resistance during the initial feeding cycle, but not enough to affect the weapon's reliability or cyclic rate. The psychological effect of sustained fire would prove as important as its physical impact against the German position. Morrison understood that machine gun effectiveness depended not only on the volume of fire delivered, but on its duration and consistency. A weapon that fired continuously for 94 seconds created different tactical pressures than one that fell silent every 37 seconds for reloading. The continuous fire would force German defenders to remain under cover, disrupting their ability to observe American movements and coordinate defensive fires with supporting positions. Morrison opened fire on the German bunker, his tracer rounds arcing across the 200 yards of forest and impacting against the log construction with visible effect. The M1919's 400 rounds per minute cyclic rate seemed almost leisurely compared to the MG42's frantic pace, but the American weapon's heavier .30 caliber ammunition delivered superior striking power against fortified positions. Each round that struck the bunker's firing aperture sent splinters flying and created concussion effects that would suppress the crew's ability to maintain accurate fire. 30 seconds of sustained fire. The German MG42 fell silent, its crew either suppressed or repositioning to avoid the concentrated American fire. Morrison maintained his fire discipline, walking his tracers across the bunker entrance, while Kowalski monitored the belt feeding to ensure smooth operation. 60 seconds, 90 seconds. The extended belt continued feeding without interruption, delivering fire that would have required 3 standard belts and 2 reload intervals to match. The German crew attempted to return fire at the 70-second mark, their MG42 barking briefly before Morrison's sustained suppression forced them back under cover. The psychological impact proved as significant as the physical effect. German crews trained to exploit American reload intervals found themselves facing continuous fire that allowed no opportunity for counteraction. Their tactical advantage disappeared when the American weapon refused to fall silent at the expected 37-second mark. 94 seconds after opening fire, Morrison ceased firing and signaled for rifle squads to advance while the German crew remained suppressed. The assault element moved across the logging trail and through the forest on a flanking route that would have been suicidal under effective machine gun fire. They reached the bunker without encountering resistance, finding 3 German soldiers who had abandoned their position when the sustained American fire made continued defense impossible. The tactical lesson was immediate and unambiguous. Sustained fire superiority could accomplish what conventional fire and maneuver tactics would have required artillery support and multiple squad-level assaults to achieve. The extended ammunition belt had transformed the tactical equation by eliminating the reload intervals that German defenders had learned to exploit throughout the European campaign. But the success came with operational costs that Morrison had anticipated during his initial design work. The 400-round belt had consumed all its ammunition during the 94-second engagement, leaving the crew without immediate fire support capability until Kowalski loaded a fresh belt. The extended belt's weight made rapid reloading more cumbersome than the standard configuration, requiring approximately 30 seconds to position and feed the new belt into the weapons receiver. During static defensive operations, the reload time represented an acceptable trade-off for the extended firing duration. During mobile operations, where tactical situations evolved rapidly, the inability to maintain continuous fire support could create vulnerabilities that German counterattacks might exploit. Morrison understood that his modification optimized the M1919 for specific tactical situations, while introducing limitations in others. The key would lie in understanding when the extended belts provided tactical advantages worth their operational costs. The advance through the Hurtgen forest continued throughout November, with 1st Battalion pushing deeper into German defensive positions that grew stronger and more sophisticated with each day's fighting. Morrison's machine gun section engaged German positions during every day of the advance, their extended ammunition belts proving their value in situations where sustained suppressive fire provided the margin between successful assault and prohibitive casualties. By November 14th, the cumulative effects of 2 weeks' continuous combat had reduced the battalion's effective strength by 40%, with casualties concentrated among the rifle companies that bore the primary burden of advancing through German positions that turned every 100 yards into a tactical problem requiring infantry assault. Morrison's crew had survived through a combination of tactical skill and the fire superiority that their modified ammunition system provided during critical engagements. The weapon's extended firing capability had enabled successful attacks against 11 German positions that conventional fire support could not have suppressed effectively. But success had extracted costs measured in physical exhaustion and dwindling ammunition supplies that the battalion's logistics network struggled to maintain during operations deep in forest terrain, where vehicle movement remained impossible. Morrison had entered the forest carrying 6 extended belts, a total ammunition load of 2,400 rounds that weighed approximately 288 pounds, distributed among his 5-man crew. By November 14th, he possessed 3 extended belts and 2 standard 250-round configurations, a mixed load that reflected both combat expenditure and the practical impossibility of constructing additional extended belts under field conditions. The hand-stitched canvas reinforcement that enabled the extended belt's reliable feeding had proven durable under combat conditions, but wear from sustained use had begun degrading the material in ways that threatened future reliability. Morrison knew that his remaining extended belts represented irreplaceable tactical assets whose loss would return his crew to the standard ammunition configuration and its associated tactical limitations. The German counterattack developed on the morning of November 15th, 1944, when veteran infantry units supported by assault guns attempted to recapture the ridgeline that 1st Battalion had secured during the previous day's fighting. Intelligence had failed to detect the German buildup, and the assault achieved tactical surprise that drove American forward positions back toward the main defensive line, with casualties that threatened to collapse the battalion's entire position. Morrison's machine gun occupied a position covering the primary approach route from the German-held forest to the south. The crew had spent the previous evening improving their fighting position, digging into the frozen ground to create overhead protection against the tree bursts that German artillery had employed with devastating effect throughout the Hurtgen fighting. The position commanded fields of fire across 200 yards of relatively open ground, where German assault troops would be forced to advance across terrain that offered minimal cover. The attack began with artillery preparation that lasted 15 minutes, high explosive rounds detonating in the forest canopy and sending shrapnel cascading down through the trees in steel rain that shredded anything caught in the open. Morrison's crew huddled in their fighting position while the forest around them transformed into a killing zone where every tree became a source of deadly fragments and every sound suggested imminent death. When the artillery lifted, German infantry emerged from the tree line 400 yards distant, advancing in squad-sized elements that used terrain features for concealment while maintaining tactical cohesion that reflected superior training and combat experience. Morrison counted at least 40 soldiers in the initial assault wave, with additional forces visible in the forest behind, suggesting a company-strength attack supported by assault guns whose movement he could hear but not yet see. The tactical situation demanded sustained suppressive fire that could break the German assault before it reached American defensive positions, too weak to resist determined attack by veteran troops. Morrison signaled for Kowalski to load one of the 3 remaining extended belts while he positioned the M1919 to engage the advancing Germans at maximum effective range. The 400-round belt fed smoothly into the weapons receiver, and Morrison opened fire when the lead German elements reached the 300-yard mark. The M1919's sustained fire swept across the German assault line with effect that disrupted their tactical cohesion within the first 30 seconds of engagement. Soldiers who had been advancing in organized squads scattered for cover as .30-caliber rounds impacted around them with the mechanical precision of mathematics applied to ballistics. Morrison walked his fire across the enemy formation, using tracer rounds to adjust his aim, while Kowalski monitored the belt feeding to prevent jams that would silence the weapon at the critical moment. 60 seconds, 90 seconds. The German assault faltered as soldiers realized that the American machine gun continued firing beyond the reload interval they had been trained to exploit. Units that should have been maneuvering during the expected American reload remained pinned in inadequate cover, unable to advance across open ground, under sustained fire that allowed no opportunity for movement. At the 2-minute mark, Morrison observed German soldiers attempting to withdraw back toward the tree line, their assault broken by fire superiority they could not match or overcome. The extended ammunition belt had delivered sustained suppression that conventional ammunition loads could not have maintained, breaking a company-strength attack through the tactical application of a simple modification that doubled a machine gun's effective firing duration. But the tactical success came at a cost that Morrison recognized even as he ceased fire and signaled for a fresh belt. The extended belt had consumed all 400 rounds, engaging a single target at extended range, an expenditure rate that left him with only 2 extended belts and his standard ammunition loads for any subsequent German attacks. The mathematics of sustained fire demanded resources that the battalion's logistics network could not replenish under current operational conditions. The German assault guns that Morrison had heard during the initial attack emerged from the forest. 30 minutes after the infantry withdrawal, their 75mm cannons engaging American positions with direct fire that shattered the log fortifications and forced defenders to abandon positions that could not withstand armor-piercing rounds. Morrison's crew faced a tactical situation their modified ammunition belts could not address. Machine guns proved ineffective against armored vehicles, and the extended belts that had broken the infantry assault offered no advantage against targets that required anti-tank weapons to neutralize. The crew withdrew from their position under covering fire from rifle squads, carrying the M1919 and their remaining ammunition through forest terrain that offered concealment from the German assault guns. They established a new defensive position 200 yards behind their original location, integrating with other elements of 1st Battalion that had fallen back before the German armor advance. The tactical situation stabilized by mid-afternoon when American tank destroyers arrived and engaged the German assault guns at ranges that favored the superior American armor-piercing ammunition. The counterattack had been contained, but at costs that reduced 1st Battalion's combat effectiveness below the threshold necessary for continued offensive operations. The battalion would be withdrawn from the Hurtgen forest within 48 hours, replaced by fresh units whose casualties would contribute to a campaign that would consume 6 American divisions before its conclusion in February of 1945. Morrison's extended ammunition belts had proven their tactical value during 2 weeks of continuous combat, enabling successful engagements against German positions that conventional fire support could not have suppressed effectively. But the modification's success highlighted broader questions about the relationship between individual innovation and institutional doctrine that the Army would grapple with throughout the remainder of the war and beyond. The after-action reports that filtered through regiment and division headquarters during late November documented 1st Battalion's fighting in the Hurtgen forest with statistics that captured combat's mathematical reality while missing its human costs. Casualties, 40% over 14 days of operations. Ground gained, 1,100 yards through heavily fortified German defensive positions. Enemy casualties inflicted, estimated at company strength, though accurate assessment remained impossible in forest terrain where German forces controlled recovery of their dead and wounded. Among the tactical innovations noted in these reports, Morrison's ammunition belt modification received brief mention as an example of individual adaptation to battlefield requirements. The documentation focused on tactical results rather than technical specifications, noting that extended duration machine gun fire had enabled successful attacks against multiple German strongpoints while maintaining American casualties below levels that conventional assault tactics would have required. The reports avoided discussion of supply regulation violations or the unauthorized modification of military equipment, focusing instead on combat effectiveness and mission accomplishment that represented the Army's ultimate assessment criteria for tactical innovation. Senior officers reviewing these reports recognized patterns that extended beyond 1st Battalion's experience in the Hurtgen forest. Machine gun crews throughout the European theater had encountered tactical situations where ammunition capacity limited combat effectiveness more significantly than weapon reliability or crew training. German defensive tactics specifically targeted American reload intervals, exploiting the predictable 15 to 20-second vulnerability that occurred every 37 seconds of sustained M1919 fire. The cumulative effect of these tactical limitations had cost American lives at every contested position from Normandy to the German border, suggesting that Morrison's modification addressed a systemic problem rather than a unique situation specific to Hurtgen forest operations. The question facing Army leadership involved whether individual field modifications represented the appropriate solution to a problem that might require institutional changes to equipment specifications and supply procedures. The ammunition belt modification influenced post-war machine gun development through research programs that explored the relationship between belt capacity, weapon portability, and sustained fire effectiveness that Morrison's innovation had demonstrated under combat conditions. Military engineers studied the technical compromises involved in extended ammunition belts, analyzing the trade-offs between increased firing duration and the handling difficulties that additional weight imposed on gun crews during mobile operations. The M1919's replacement, the M60 machine gun, adopted during the 1950s, incorporated design features that reflected lessons learned from wartime experiences, including Morrison's extended belt innovation. The M60 used disintegrating link ammunition belts that could be connected to create any desired length, eliminating the fixed capacity limitation that had characterized earlier ammunition systems. The weapon's design optimized it for sustained fire while maintaining portability that allowed single-soldier operation during assault operations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.